How's it going there, my friends? Hope everybody's doing well today, and welcome back to Carpo's channel. Today I wanted to talk for a moment about qualified immunity, and I promise it won't be boring, it won't be too long, because I only have like 10 minutes before I got to go pick up my son from school. So I would like to make it clear first off that it's not just specifically qualified immunity here. There, if you're not aware of what it is, it's basically when an officer harms the wrong person or shoots someone where they shouldn't have, the officer is never responsible for their own actions. This is very rarely done, and this is changing. In places like Colorado, they actually ended qualified immunity. I believe in Denver, caused a lot of heartache for a lot of police officers that don't want to be charged with making a mistake. And there's something to be said about that. When you're in the heat of battle and the heat of action, you make mistakes. And it's understandable, but it's much different than, blatantly shooting someone 7 times in the back when they're unarmed, that kind of thing. But no accountability for officers means that they can basically just blame the department, or if there's any lawsuits that take action, then it is the department that is sued. We know this. Which means basically, if the cops make a mistake and they shoot the wrong person, or they abuse someone, or beat someone up for no reason, and they get sued, we all pay for it. You and I, even the person who's getting beat up, they're paying for part of the cop's salary. I did the math the other day for one of the settlements from something the police did a couple years back. And when I did the math, I thought, how many people live in Philadelphia? And it was not the one you're thinking of. Anyway. The point being here that it came out to something like $100 per taxpayer in that city. Now, I don't know how all the money's spread up around, but we're saying specifically in that area for that police force, that's $100 per person. And, to pay somebody else's lawsuit for a mistake. So qualified immunity needs to end, and it needs to end soon. I mean, it is one of the things that doesn't allow people to get any justice. And I'm all about justice. And the thing is, I'm not an anti-cop. I want to make that very clear. I've met some great cops, and many cops do the right thing. And they are members of their community and upstanding citizens. But the thing is, just like a non-criminal going to jail for something, say they didn't do, if you've ever, been to jail, you know how horrible it is. Well, going to jail or going to prison breeds criminals. So if you send someone to jail for a joint or a little bit of weed, they're going to learn a hell of a lot more about criminal life just by being there. Well, the same way, if a few corrupt cops are in the force, then the others are going to kind of follow suit. It's going to be a learning experience for them, and they're forced into it. If there is corruption, then police feel like they either have to be part of it or they're ostracized by the department. Now, this is just specifically here about police, as I've been talking about, but the bigger picture I wanted to cover and why this is important is it's not just in the police departments, obviously. The larger an organization is, the larger a company is or a government organization, the less liable they are for anything, and nobody ever has to be accountable for anything. If you or I make a mistake, we pay for it. We go to jail. We get charged. We get fined, whatever it might be. But if other people do, then they can just kind of pass the buck. A good example would be lawsuits surrounding various chemicals and poisonous compounds that have been used. Things like Monsanto and Roundup, where people can file lawsuits, but they might just pay a few small fines, because to them it's just a drop in the hat. It's nothing. I mean, it's not even paying out a few $1,000,000 here and there, or hiring a dozen lawyers for your company is worth it, because the profits even will help pay for all of the failures. The same thing happens with white-collar crime, with politicians, with corporate people who, CEOs of companies who are found embezzling millions of dollars from these funds, sometimes from governments, or from the U.S. government, or people who have these, subcontractors that work for the government that completely rip them off and then get charged. But what happens? They end up paying a small fine or a fee. Even smaller organizations, or for example, the BBC. This is a good example. A few years back, they did this was a few decades back. there was a morning show where they'd do stunts on there, and I just watched something about it earlier. And the stunt went horribly wrong. People would volunteer for, they'd want to be on TV, and then they'd have a week to prepare to do this stunt on live television. Long story short, the guy was on a bungee cord on a crane, and the bungee wasn't properly secured, and he splat, hit the ground, and he died. Well, I believe they said that the guy from the show sent the family a wreath. I don't even know why they said that, a wreath. But then the BBC was fined $126,000 or something like that, or paid a small fine or a settlement. And I thought about this. These tiny amounts of money that are just thrown at issues, The same way that when you do hear about, for example, a police department being sued, you don't hear about all of the ones that are settled out of court, or all of the smaller lawsuits that are dismissed or not paid out. But if you want to talk about people not paying for their crimes, all you have to do is look no further than, Bush and Cheney during the, Iraq years here after 9/11, and completely lying about the weapons. We all know that these people who we had hired to run our country had completely lied to us, and still do to this day. It's no surprise to Americans that we're always being lied to. The whole thing is just like, this big act. But even today, instead of someone like that being charged for their failures, well, Cheney died, I guess, recently, I think. But Bush, now he's being interviewed on national television talking about, some of the mistakes we made in Afghanistan. Like, you should not even have the right to be on television. You should be in prison as far as I'm concerned. But how quickly we forget. And that's just the thing. If people can get away with these crimes and doing things that are beyond their power that they should have, they will continue to do it. A final perfect example would be the pharmaceutical industry. Even a few years ago, people were suspicious about the pharmaceutical industry, and now the people are trying to force pharmaceuticals on each other because we all think that we understand more than we really do. And but the pharmaceutical industry has made plenty of mistakes in the past through heart medications, antipsychotics that have been recalled sometimes months, years later. And you'll see these little ads of, if you got cancer from taking this medication, or had seizures or heart attacks, then call this number for this lawsuit, which is a whole other problem in society. These predatory lawyers, if you will. They're as bad as predatory paycheck loans. But the point being that nobody's held liable. If any one of us do the same shit, we would not only, let's say you do something at your job and you lose your job because of it. You go to get your next job, and they look at your job history and find out, oh my God, this guy, did something horrible on the job site, or pissed in the corner, whatever it might be. But if an officer does it, a police officer, then the actual department they work for will often hide that and say it's okay, it's okay. There are some police officers that have literally dozens of complaints against them in their department, and they're still on the streets. And some of them, eventually, who do get fired or demoted, they will leave and go to another city's department. And if you don't realize this, if you got fired in one city as a police officer, you can go to the next one and they won't care. There's no a country-based database where every officer can check the history of every other officer or all the lawsuits that were done. These things just aren't well documented outside of the cities where they are. So, you've got Rambo running around the streets with a gun and a baton, beating the shit out of people because he knows he can. And there's no accountability. And that bothers me, and I guess the reason I focused on police more than corporations or politicians here is because the police are the ones that carry guns around in our society. And it's the militarization of the police has taken place over such a long period of time that many kids today just assume that cops have always worn riot gear and helmets, It just wasn't like that. And there was a time when officers walked the beat, just like there was a time when politicians were forced to answer to their constituents, and a time when these corporations and companies, pharmaceuticals, were actually out to invent new things that could help society. And now it's just about profit, and there's no accountability. So guess I've said what I got to say. I'll talk to y'all next time. Have yourselves a wonderful day.